Like you saw at the beginning of the video, today we're going to be making an amazing visual effects shot that will take you everything from camera tracking to CGI all the way to compositing a final result that should give you a Hollywood level visual effects shot. I'm going to walk you through all of these steps that I take when tackling a shot like this that you can apply to your own work. Before we get started, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreon members. If you are interested in joining, I'll have a link down below where you can check it out. But anyways, thank you guys so much. Also, I just quickly wanted to mention that I will have all of the download links to everything that I use down below if you are interested in following along. Okay, so with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into camera tracking. Okay, so here is the video that we're going to be using today. You can see that there is some slight camera movement, and so that's going to be really important for us to kind of match in 3D just so that everything looks natural and like it's actually there in the CGI. So let's X out of here. Now I'm going to be doing my camera tracking in a program called Syntheyes today. I'll actually have an affiliate link down below if you want to check them out, but I just find that this program is much better suited for industry standard camera tracking work. There's this program and then also PF Track are kind of the two kind of industry standard programs for camera tracking, and I just find it gives you much better results than Blender ever can. So that is what we're going to be using. Let's go ahead and open this up. So I'm going to hit new and then locate wherever I save that footage that you can download down below. So here it is. I'm just going to click that and open that up. It does a pretty good job of already guessing some of the stuff. This is where you kind of want to double check, but all of this looks good. Let's hit OK. And the next thing, I want Syntheyes to kind of do a first pass for me, get all of the kind of tracking markers out on the table. This is what this program is really great at, is kind of doing a lot of this heavy lifting for us for easy scenes like this. I want to go ahead and hit fine tune, and you do want to make sure that it's not a zoom lens or a tripod, and if they are, just select those up there. After that, we can hit auto, and it'll kind of run through its own algorithms and try to place some tracking markers on the scene. Okay, so after that, we are now in the solver tab up here, and we have solved the scene correctly. Now, if you want to see your solve error, if you are used to Blender or anything like that, that is up here. This is our horizontal pixel solve error. You can also see it down here in a little graph form, which is also nice to see where maybe some parts of the clip are a little bit higher of a solve error than others. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and try to get this as low as possible. Let's go ahead and click slow but sure. This will just kind of double check that it's accurate, and it might take a little bit longer, but that's totally fine for me. Also, let's go ahead and save the project just to be safe. Okay, so now that we have this set up, let's go ahead and change this from automatic. We're going to go to refine because now we're refining that kind of pixel solve error. And then let's go ahead and just hit go real quick. And so as you can see, nothing has really changed. I just want to make sure that the slow but sure, wasn't going to pick up anything separately. Okay, so now let's go through an entire process to get this track as low as possible. Let's come to the track tab up here, clean up trackers. And then this little window pops up over here. We can go ahead and select the high error trackers. And then also I'll enable this bad frames, and we'll select this right here as well. Basically, these are just going to detect some of the frames that are bad within the trackers and try to fix them. Instead of actually deleting the markers, it'll actually do that. And then this high error tracks will just select the highest error tracks and go ahead and just get those out of the scene. Since we have so many in the scene, it's not going to really matter if we delete the highest error tracks. And so we'll go ahead and hit fix right there. And as you can see, nothing has changed. It's basically just deleted some of the markers that we had selected up there, but our error is still the same. And so that's where we need to go ahead and refine this again. So I'm going to hit go. And now you can see our error is much lower. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to continue that process a little bit more, just get this down as low as possible. Now, very important for this scene and pretty much, camera tracking in general, is we want markers on the floor plane. And so I'm going to be using this table as our floor plane. And so I want to make sure I'm not really deleting any of the markers over here, since that's where our CGI is going to be focused in the scene. And so it's always nice to have a lot of, markers around where your CGI is going to be, just so you can use that as reference inside of Blender. Anyways, we can hold Shift C, I believe, is to go to that cleanup trackers menu. First of all, I want to deselect this. I just want to go ahead and delete some of the higher error tracks. So we'll go ahead and delete those 9. So I'm setting that to 12, just to kind of delete all of those. You can see they're just all kind of around the scene there. So we'll go ahead and fix those. And then refine it again. You can see got it a little bit lower. Let's Shift C again. We'll turn the bad frames back on. This is just selecting the kind of frame range inside of some of these trackers and deleting kind of the highest error sections, just disabling it. It's not actually deleting the tracker, but we have 6 high error trackers. We can fix that. Then Control or Shift G is to actually go ahead and just refine it again. So Shift C, I'm gonna just do this one more time. So 3, Shift G, that is looking good. We'll just do it one more time. So I'll push this down to like 6. Now we are selecting some of the kind of tracking markers on the table now. So I might actually bring this up a little bit. And actually it seems like it's just a bad frame. So that should be fine. So we'll bring this down and we'll do like 9 tracking markers there and we'll fix that. And then finally Shift G again. And now our solve error is down to a 0.35. And so that is really good. We are actually ready to export this out. Actually, before we do that, we do need to go ahead and tell the scene where the actual floor is, because if I come over here, we can go to the 3D tab and I'll add a little box on the top of our thing. You can see our box is, number one, it is camera track, so that is good, but the box isn't aligning onto the table where it needs to be. And so we basically need to tell Syntheyes where the floor plane of our scene is so that everything is correctly rotated in our scene, just because that'll be a hassle to do inside of Blender. So what we need to do is I'm on the 3D tab. We'll come over to this over here. We'll go to the quad perspective layout. And then if I lock the screen to the camera's point of view, so we can actually see the background footage, and then I'm going to go ahead and select pan 2D just so I can pan this around if needed to select markers. And then down here, I'll go to mode, I'll lasso the trackers. And so that's how I can actually select some of these trackers. So what we're doing now is we want to go ahead and find, some areas of our footage that will be a good ground plane. Now this table is very flat. There are actually 2 tables here, and so they're slightly offset from each other. I don't think that'll be a huge deal. So I actually just assumed that this table was a huge, long, flat table. So we can select pretty much all these markers right here. So the way I like to actually set up my floor plane inside of Syntheyes, there are tons of ways to do it. If you dive into this program, it's a super advanced program, and you can pretty much do anything your own way, whatever you find works for you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to lasso some trackers, and I'm going to just select all the trackers that are kind of on the table surface. The reason I'm not selecting this one is because this one looks like it's on the side of the table, and so that might give us some incorrect data there. So I have all of these tracking markers now. I'm going to open up this grid view over here, and then with this grid view, I'm just going to hit this button to facet, verts, and trackers. So now you can see it's basically tried to orient our floor. And the nice thing about this button is this is the exact same button we're going to use to actually get the rotation and the origin of our scene as well. And so what I can do is now if I just select 2 of these kind of tracking markers, so I'll select these 2. If you press that button again, it'll actually do the rotation of the scene. And so that is very nice. You can see it's rotating much more naturally now. And if I play it, you should see that our floor plane is lining up much more naturally to the table like that. The final thing I want to do is define the origin of our scene, just wherever our origin is going to be inside of Blender. And for me, I'll place it in the middle right here. So we'll click that one and then click facet vertice trackers, and since we had one selected, it actually set up our origin of our scene. Yeah, so this is looking pretty good now. You can see everything is looking natural over here on the perspective view. However, if you see the view over here, nothing has actually changed, and that's because we actually need to go ahead and apply the grid that we had set up. So all we have to do that is make grid the ground. And so now everything has changed over here. In a way I like to actually check inside of the program, if we kind of zoom in right here, I'll click this box. This is basically to just draw a box up here. So I'll click and drag that, and we'll just put that on the table right there. And so now you can see that basically this box is exactly on the table and is going to give us a lot of good kind of tracking markers for that table to be defined inside of Blender. So what I want to do now is you can go ahead and, scale the scene correctly inside of Syntheyes. To be honest, I prefer to do that inside of Blender just because my own workflow, it's kind of, very nice to be able to mess around with that inside of Blender, since sometimes the programs don't communicate the best of the ways. But what we can do is let's save the project first of all. And let's come up here to File. We'll go to Export, and it actually has a Blender Python export. So we'll go ahead and select that. And then I'm just going to name it Blender Python is what we want. We'll save that as, and then this menu pops up. I do want the starting frame to be frame 1. That is what Nuke is going to use as well. So it's just nice to kind of match those. And then Blender version, you can select whatever you want here. I believe 3.2 plus is the one that we want. And then finally, if you don't have this set up correctly, it won't actually launch the Blender program. And so you just want to double check down here, the Blender application window. You just want to make sure that that's going into the right Blender version that you're using, just because if you don't have it, it won't actually open up Blender after the fact, and you'll actually have to import in the Python script manually. And so just a little bit of hassle there. So just make sure that this is set up correctly. Anyways, let's go ahead and hit OK. And you can see it's loading, and then it'll actually open up a brand new Blender script. And so that is right here. Here is the brand new Blender script that it actually went ahead and opened. And as you can see, everything is perfectly tracked and set up as we had it inside of Syntheyes. And so literally just one click to get it inside of Blender. It's a really nice kind of feature. Okay, so now with the camera tracking out of the way, let's go ahead and start setting up some of our 3D. So first of all, it goes ahead and creates some collections up here. I'm just going to kind of undo some of these collections. I do like to keep the tracker collection because then we can turn that on and off and basically just disable the trackers from actually being seen. So that's really nice. We don't need this light for now. We'll go ahead and delete that as well. And then I'm just going to go ahead and make a new camera collection and just place both of these things in here. So I'll drag and drop both of those into the camera collection just to make sure that we're organized as much as possible right now. So like I said before, I like to do my scaling inside of Blender. And so that is the next step. We'll go ahead and I'll Shift A, add a mesh cube. And then if I hit tab to go into edit mode, I'll hit A, G, Z, and then control click that up 1 unit. Basically, all I'm doing that for is so that the origin is on the ground plane. And so this is the ground plane that we set up inside of Syntheyes. And so to me, it's very important to just maintain that kind of relationship as we scale. So anyways, you can see if I come and hit in, we'll go to the in panel, and over here you can see the scale dimensions is set up to be 2 meters. Now 2 meters is basically a very tall person, is like kind of how I like to put it. And so right now this person would be super tiny in our scene. And so this goes back to our talks before, where we do need to make sure the scale is set up properly inside Blender. So let's go ahead and do that. We actually have the Syntheyes world setting right here. And if I disable the collection for the trackers, you can see if we move this around, everything is tied to that. And so what I basically want to do is I want to, with this selected, I want to hit S to scale, and I want to scale this up so that this cube is basically as big as a human would be from our camera's point of view. And so I'll scale that down, and so something like that is looking pretty good. And then also what I like to do, we'll come over to the view for this specific scene. We'll set, item over here. We'll set this to be like 0.33. That's basically 1 foot as a meter. And then we'll just make these go down. So it's basically 1 foot tall. And so if I kind of think in the scene right now, that would basically be 1 foot. It might be, within margin of error, but that looks pretty good to me. And so just base it on yourself. But that is 1 foot on our scene, and that basically follows 1 foot in the camera point of view. Okay, so now that our scene is scaled up correctly, we can go ahead and set up some render settings. So I always like to do this first before I do anything else. So we'll go to the render properties. I like to work in cycles. We're going to render on GPU, and then we're going to denoise our viewport using optics right there. And then I also might set this down to 128 sample count. And then this one will also set to 128 sample count. We might increase that as we go along, but it's always nice to kind of use a lower sample count and then render out high quality settings at the very end once we have all of the creative decisions made. Anyways, we'll denoise this as well and use our GPU for open image denoise. So that is looking all good. Final steps, we need to go ahead and enable motion blur, and then we'll go to film and make sure transparent is turned on. So yes, that is all looking good. We are ready to start dealing with some of our 3D. So first thing I want to do is I kind of want to model out some of these things. Now I do want some objects on this table, as well as some of these tables in the foreground as well. So let's go ahead and start modeling out some of these things. So I'm going to make a new collection. We'll just name it tables for now. I'll hit Shift A, mesh plane. This also might be a good opportunity to bring a new window out here just so we can kind of mess around with some of this stuff. So that is all looking good. Let's zoom in here. I'll hit S to scale that down. And basically what I'm doing now is just trying to model out the kind of surface of our table right there. So let's go ahead and go into edit mode. I'll select this kind of edge right here. And I do want to make sure the scene is rotated correctly. Now these tables are separated in the real world, but again, I'm just going to kind of use them as one, think of it as like one big table. So that is looking good. I think our rotation is actually pretty good on our scene. So I don't know if, I don't think we're going to have to mess with that. But you know, we'll check it real quick. So if I do that, it's a little bit off. As you can see, I'm basing that because this corner right here should be right here. And then this corner over here is a little bit off kilter. And so what we need to do, it's a super easy fix. We'll select the scene world settings again. Remember that ties everything together in relation to how it was inside of Syntheyes. And so if we just now R and then Z, we can just rotate it along the Z-axis and try to make it a little bit more straight along the edge of this table. And so that looks a lot better. We'll go ahead and edit this a little bit more. So X, and as you can see, now the corners match up more, a lot better. And so this corner is looking good there, and that corner is looking perfect over there. And so that is much more correctly rotated in our scene. So let's get this one, and I'll move it in the UI over there. And of course, it's not lining up perfectly. I might cheat it a little bit. This is where, you know, maybe if I was doing it as a client and I needed it super precise, I would, you know, super make sure that our camera track was, you know, accurate to a T. But that looks pretty good to me. We'll go ahead and I'll select A for everything. I'll hit E and then Z to extrude it down on the Z axis. But yeah, that looks pretty good and matches our table. Now, what I do want to go ahead and do is I do want to go ahead and add some bevel, just because when we're actually going to be doing lighting, everything in the real world has some bevel to it. Basically, no object in the real world is ever perfectly straight. Even the tip of a knife will have a little bit of a curve to it. And that's important because when we do some lighting, and more importantly for this, shadows later on, it's going to give us some more accurate results and some more accurate fall off for compositing. So let's go ahead. I'm going to Control R is to add some loop cuts. We'll just go ahead and add some of those here. I'll add another one here to the corner. And then we also need one to the back of this as well. And then we do need some on these as well. So I'll just add 2 there. Basically just making a little kind of point here. Then quick tip, if you hold Control and then hit 2, on your thing, it'll actually go ahead and add in a subdivision surface modifier. So that's just a quick little thing right there. So now what we need to do, let's see, we'll zoom in over here. Now the back, I think, is the only one that we have left. So we'll Control R again. So Control R, I actually need to be in edge mode. Control R to add a loop cut. We'll bring that over here. And yeah, all I really care about for this is just adding a little bit of a kind of beveled edge here. We'll go ahead and shade smooth just so it's a little bit nicer looking here. It might increase this to like 3. There we go. So now you can see the light is actually on that corner. It's actually more, you know, realistic, and will give us better kind of fall off and stuff there. So that is the reason we do that. Next thing, let's go ahead and do these tables as well. It's kind of the very similar process. So we'll Shift A. Add a circle this time, and we'll position this over to where it would be. So we're like right around here. Now you do want to make sure everything is on this floor plane. Now, based on this footage, I'm just judging that this table is roughly the same height as this other table. And so that's very important just because, again, this red line is our floor plane that we set up inside of Syntheyes. And so it's very important for camera tracking to actually maintain that kind of relationship. So anyways, we'll go ahead and S and scale that down. Basically just looking over here to kind of scale this table where the actual thing in real life would be. So around there is looking pretty good. We don't need to be perfect for these since these are kind of in the foreground and they're going to be blurred out a lot anyway. And so it really doesn't matter. Anyways, we'll come to Tab, F to add a face there. We'll E to extrude that down for the table surface. And then it also has like a little like curve to the edge. And so what I'm going to do is we'll go ahead and add this curve. S to scale that out a little bit. And then let's go ahead and add our subdivision surface modifier. So Control 2. And then we do need to fix these tops. So I'll go to face select, hit I to inset that a couple of times. And then, you know, just to make it a little bit cleaner, we can also delete this face. I'm going to delete that face. We'll select this edge loop. And then I'll just, what is it? Grid fill. There we go. So yes, that I just did F3 to search up grid fill. And so now it's actually in quads instead of being a huge like 32 polygon face. And so that just kind of helps out some texturing if we ever do that. It's just kind of good practice, if you will. Let's do the exact same thing to the bottom as well. This one doesn't matter as much. So I might just, you know, just leave it in the middle. So now you can see this is one massive face versus like this is good kind of quad geometry and stuff like that. That gets into more topology and all that stuff, but that's typically why we do that. Now, what I do want to do is I do want to add a edge loop right here, because if I come out to the camera again, there's not a huge kind of gap, a huge curve to it, if you will. So let's double tap G, move this outwards. I might also, we'll select this one in the middle, S to scale that in. That's looking pretty good. And then I might also S to scale this up, just to kind of fill that out a little bit more. And let's shade smooth. So yeah, so that is the table done right there. I think that is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and let's Alt D to duplicate this. Alt D basically just creates a instance of the object, so we're saving some geometry and stuff like that. So we'll hit S to scale that up, and yeah, that looks pretty good. Both the tables are in place now. And let's play this footage. Let's make sure that the tables are actually lining up. Sometimes I'll come to wireframe and hit Alt Z to unhide everything, just so we can see the kind of wired frame version of this, so that we can see everything is matching accurately. And so yeah, as you can see, it's following the table pretty well. So yeah, I'm pretty happy about that. We are now ready to start adding in some of our actual CGI objects. Okay, so let's go ahead and add those in. I'm going to create a new collection over here, and I'm just going to name them objects. Now for today's video, I'm going to keep it super simple for you guys. I actually found a website, Polyhaven. We use this a ton of the time when dealing with HDRIs and textures and all that stuff. But they actually have some amazing models directly for Blender as well. So we'll browse some of these models and just browse through here, find some ones that you want. I scrolled down. I think I ended up doing some of these candle holders right here, this cake right here. I was testing to do some of these goblets, but that was a little not kind of the vibe we were going for. So this is where you can play around, this chess set, all that stuff. So go ahead and just look through these, kind of find some ones that you like and that you want to put into the scene. And then once you have those downloaded, we can go ahead and import those in the scene. Now, when you download the actual models and you extract them on your end, you should have a ton of Blender files right here. And then I went ahead and just consolidated everything into one kind of folder. So I put all of the textures in one folder. As long as that folder is named textures, then it's actually going to link OK and be OK on its end. And so, yeah, this is basically just how I'm setting it up here. And they are all in a Blender format. And so that makes it super easy for this process. Instead of importing it in as a OBJ file or FBX or anything like that, we can go ahead and just append it from those Blender scenes. So we'll go up here to File, we'll go to Append, and then we need to locate those files. Okay, here we go. So we have the candle holders. We'll do those first. So I'll go in here, go to Object, and then I'm just going to hit A to bring all of those in, and we'll append those in the scene. So now we have our candles in the scene, and as you can tell, since we set up the scale correctly inside of Blender, these objects are also scaled correctly. And so as you can see, these are basically the rough height of what they would actually look like in the Blender scene. And so as you can see, it's basically roughly the same height that they would be in real life. And so that is just another way to double check that your scale is set up correctly. Anyways, we'll go ahead and import some more in. So I'll go to File, Append, we'll come back out of here, and then we'll go to the chess set. We'll go to Object, just select all of those in there, and it'll take a little bit. We'll go to File, Append, and you just want to do this for all of the different files. And so I'll do it one last time for this cake model. So I'll just import that in and append that, and as you can see, it's imported in the scene. So I'll go ahead and do the other ones off camera, but whatever you want on the table, just go ahead and import that into your Blender scene. Okay, now that we have our objects in our scene, we can go ahead and start placing some of these around and start having a little bit of fun with it. So first of all, what I want to do is let's just have some fun. Place this candle like right here, maybe place some of the wine bottles over here. I'm kind of just following what I did before. But of course I, planned this out, probably spent like a good 20 minutes of just kind of placing the scene correctly and seeing what kind of felt right in my own head and stuff like that. So I'll just place another kind of wine bottle over here. And by the way, I'm moving it on the ground plane. That is very important to kind of notice. Whenever I'm moving stuff around, instead of just hitting G and kind of making it float all the way, up in Z space, I'm also holding Shift and then Z, and that'll basically lock it to the floor plane. And so that's how I'm moving stuff around right there. So next thing, we'll do this little kind of candle set right here. So G, move that over here. I'll place this candle like right there, and then we have this kind of teapot that I kind of like. This is basically where you want to go ahead and just place and rotate all of this stuff. I'm not going to show you everything in this because you can spend, so much time kind of placing this stuff. So I'll go ahead and, skip ahead to where I place some stuff. Just have some fun with it. But all you need to do is just G, Shift Z, and then R, Z to rotate them if you want. And so I'll be back after I'm done placing some of my objects. Okay, so I finally placed everything. You can see everything is just nicely placed on the table. You can also view it through render view and maybe hide some of these table objects just to kind of feel what it's feeling like. I know nothing is kind of lit before yet, but let's go ahead and deal with the animation because I feel like it's always nice to kind of have the animation baked in because that will sometimes influence your lighting. And so I kind of like to do that before I do anything else. Okay, so to go ahead and do some animation, it's super simple. Let's go ahead and select all the objects in our collection. So I can right click and select objects in here. So we have all of these selected. Let's go ahead and start doing some keyframes. So I'm going to go ahead and hit K and then L to add a location keyframe. And then we also need a rotation keyframe since we're going to have some of the pieces and stuff actually rotate in midair. Let's K and then R to add a rotation keyframe. And so so now we have this little yellow dot right here on frame 1, and so that is very good. Next, I want to go all the way to the end of our clip, and so the very last frame of our clip right here, which is 2:30 for me. And so at the very end of our footage, we want to go ahead and frame everything to how they actually would be at the end. And so then we can do some cool animation stuff there. So what I found to kind of be an easy workaround is to go ahead and turn on auto keying right here. So basically any change that we do, it'll automatically go ahead and apply that to all of our, animation channels in our actual thing. So we don't have to do any heavy lifting down here. So first of all, let's go ahead and do some of these things. So I'll come to the end of my clip. Let's go ahead and just move some of these things up in the air. So right there. And again, I'm just hitting G and then Z to move those things up. And I do want some variation. Like I want this cake to be higher than the actual plate carrying it. So something like that. And we'll do the same thing for this teapot. I want the lid to be higher than the actual teapot right here. And so we'll move some of these up. And then something like that is looking good. Again, we just care about the kind of Z axis right now. At the very end, we'll do some rotation to it as well. And so here is where we want to get some fancy stuff here as well. And just kind of move these wine bottles how we think it should actually look. And then finally, the fun part is this chest set back here. So if I actually go ahead and Z move that up, I kind of want it to stop up here, like right there. And then I want all of these pieces to kind of be up in the air. And so what I'm actually going to do is let's go ahead and select all these pieces right here. So I'm going to just select all of these. So there are all the pieces. And then we can just Z, we'll move those all the way up here. And then now with all of them up here, I can kind of move them around some random directions. Just have some fun with it, kind of what you want it to kind of look like. But I'm trying to make sure that the patterns aren't really like that patterny. It's more randomized, just because I find the kind of random nature of it all kind of looks a little bit more cool in my opinion. And so we'll just move some of these down. And yeah, this is really based on what you want this to look like. Again, this is like a lot of playing around, a lot of just having fun with it. And kind of getting the result that you want. Like maybe you don't want this animation. Maybe you want something a little bit more, maybe it's floating in midair and actually spinning or something like that. And so this is where you can get a little bit more fun into it. And since we have the auto keyframing on, by the way, it's basically interpolating everything already. And so it's already doing the heavy lifting for us. So we'll come to 2:30. Everything is looking pretty cool. Now let's go ahead and add some random rotation. So that's, I like to just double tap R and kind of rotate stuff. So we'll just rotate everything to be sort of random. I like to kind of have a pattern to some of this stuff. Just trying to make the frame look interesting. Like I'll have this, maybe this horse kind of rotated like a cool way so we can see its profile. And then some of these pawns we could just have pointing to camera and stuff like that. Again, you don't want anything to kind of look like it's being duplicated. So the more random we can get this stuff, the better. And there are probably even ways to do it as like drivers inside of Blender to get like random rotation or something like that. But just for the sake of this, it's going to be super easy to just kind of double tap R and do it ourselves, And so I always think the easier way is the fastest. And so dealing with drivers and all that stuff might be a little bit too time consuming and everything for our scene. So almost done with these chess pieces right here. I think just this pawn is left, and that's looking pretty good. I might rotate this one out just so everything is looking a little bit more chaotic up here. And this one we'll put like right there. So that is looking good. We'll also do these wine bottles over here. So something like that. And then this chandelier we'll do like right there. And then finally over here, we'll do some of these background ones as well. And so these plates I kind of want to have flying around. This teacup have right there. This cake, all this stuff. And so that's the basic workflow of like how I did it. I just did it kind of randomly, and then you can always play around with some of this stuff later. But yeah, that's pretty much all I did. And so now let's kind of see the animation. You can see it all goes up and it's all looking kind of cool right there. Now I do want to add it kind of ramping because right now basically what's happening is it's slowly kind of going up. And then at the very end, it's kind of slowly falling in place, whereas I want it to kind of act like it's never going to stop at the end of the clip. So what we can do is with everything selected, so we'll select all objects over here. We'll go to the graph editor, and you can see we have all of this mess over here. Don't worry about all of that. If we hit A and then hit period on our numpad, we can actually see a much simpler kind of view over here. All I'm looking for is I'm looking for this little kind of edge of this. I don't know what you call it, but the kind of point of that animation curve, I guess you would call it. We want to hit G and then X and move that all the way to the end so it's touching the other thing. So basically it's going to be a linear thing, and so by the end of the clip you won't tell that it's slowing down or anything like that. Again, I'm not an animator, so I don't know the technical terms, but that's basically what we want to do to make the animation a little bit more pleasing for our actual render. So yeah, so that is the animation done. Of course, play around with it, get a result that you want, but now we are ready for the lighting. Okay, so for lighting inside Blender, this scene is going to be super simple. I'm going to kind of walk you through my process when thinking about these things. But first of all, we can go ahead and come to the render view. You can see everything is not set up correctly. We can still see the material of the table. And then we can also see that everything has this gray, blank, ugly lighting into the scene. And so that is actually due to the world tab. So if we come to the world tab, you can see everything has this kind of base color here. Now, there are many different approaches to lighting a scene inside of Blender. Many people swear by HDRIs, and I don't get me wrong, HDRIs are totally great. However, they do introduce a lot more time for rendering. I find that when you use a HDRI for your world settings, it actually can double sometimes per frame your render time. And so that's where we want to cut down some of these render times, and also we can get it a little bit more accurate. So I'm going to go ahead and go add a new collection. We'll just name this lighting for now. And if I kind of play this clip, you can barely see over here, we kind of have like some windows kind of peeking out. And then also if I hide some of these tables, you can see some of these shadows over here. So that gives us shadow direction as well as intensity. And so we need to match this to the actual CGI. So it's super easy for the scene. All I'm going to do is I'm going to shift A. We're going to add a light. We're going to do an area light. Basically, this area light is just going to act as our windows. And so think of this scene as being lit by sunlight basically bouncing in through the windows. We basically want to have some area lights be that sunlight coming in through the windows. And so that is super easy. We'll go ahead and I'll bring this new window out here just because I want to be able to place these lights where I want them to be. So we'll rotate that on the X 90 degrees. We'll place that over here. And yeah, so now let's go to frame 1 actually, and I'll turn off auto keying. I don't want this keyframe right here. So I'll go ahead and delete that. But yeah, on frame 1, we can't see any light right now. So we'll go ahead and set this up to like 5,000 watts. We'll see if that's good enough. And yeah, that is giving us pretty decent kind of lighting already. We might change it around with it a little bit. I'll unhide the table. Now you can see some shadows. Now for the material of our thing, you will see down here, if I actually come over here and set the visibility to shadow catcher, this is what we want. However, we're having a lot of that white bounce light actually affect some of the reflections and everything of this actual, some of these heavily reflective materials and stuff like that. So what I want to do is I basically want this, the material of our table right here to be the material of the actual footage. And so to import that in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the shader editor. We'll add a new material. I'm just going to name this footage. I'm going to shift A. We can add a image texture node. I'm going to place that into the base color of our principled BSDF. And let's go ahead and open up our footage. Okay, so here is our footage. Now I do have a full quality footage that I've been using for camera tracking and then compositing later. And then I also have this proxy that I generated. It's just a H.264 proxy. And so as you can see, the megabytes are way different between the two. I just did that inside of DaVinci Resolve if you are curious in that. But I'm going to select the proxy just because we don't need the high fidelity textures since they won't actually be seen. As long as they are just, sort of like the clip, that's all I really care about. So we'll open up that image, and I do need to set the frame to 230 right there. We'll auto refresh on, and then we'll go ahead, Control T to add a texture coordinate mapping node and place this to window, just so it's correctly rotated in our scene. And then finally, I need to up the roughness and then detract the specular, just removing some of the reflections of our scene. So now that is much better. You can see that we're actually having some of that brown light kind of be on our actual reflective materials, which is going to be really nice for us to actually match it inside of compositing and all that. So let's back out of here and turn the shadow catcher on again. And we'll do those for these things as well. So I'll select all three of my materials. If I Control L and then hit M, that'll link the materials. And then also these two right here, I can select these two. If I hold Alt and then click shadow catcher, it'll apply those to both of those, just so we have the shadow catcher on those as well. And so so that is all about getting the lighting set up into our scene. It's very subjective here, but for this specific scene, I find that it's really not too hard to match this lighting. So we'll go ahead. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit S and Z to scale these, since these windows are probably very tall compared to just being a square box, and so that kind of helps a little bit. Also, I want to make sure the shadows are accurate, so I might move these like over here. So having our window kind of start over here, roughly starting over there, which is where the window would be in our actual footage. And so that was looking good. I might also go ahead and I'll Alt D and move it on the Y just to add some more kind of lighting. So Alt D again and go to Y. And there we go. So now we have like 3 sets of windows over here that it matches pretty well to our lighting over here. Now, don't worry about these shadows. The shadows is actually something we're going to do inside of compositing to match those, just because right now you can see they're a black, ugly mess versus over here. They're more of a, a subtle brown color. And so we'll just make sure to match that inside of compositing. But yeah, that is basically all of the lighting setup in our scene. Now, one quick thing to note, we do want to be inside of AGX. If you come over here, go to the color management, and if we go to standard, you can see we have so much light in our scene that it's actually creating some, overexposure. And so we just want to make sure we're in AGX, which is default of cycles, but I just want to bring that up in case you are running into that issue. Okay, so everything is looking good. There is one big thing that we are missing right now, and that is actually the depth of field. If I kind of zoom in here, you can see the table is very out of focus. However, these chess pieces are super in focus. And so we need to go ahead and define the area where the camera is actually going to be focused to, so that we can replicate that as much as we can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Shift A. I like to add a empty plane axis. And then let's look in an area in the clip where everything seems to be a lot in focus. And so it seems like this chair and maybe the front of the table is very in focus right now. So I'm going to kind of get an area around there. So I would say like right here, it's kind of in the middle of those two. Those are pretty in focus. And so that is basically going to be my point for focus. So I'll go ahead and call this empty focus right here. And we'll put it in the scene collection bin right there. Now I want to select my camera up here. We'll go to the depth of field section and select my focus object to be focus right there. And then already you can tell that the focus is much better. It's giving us accurate fall off. Now this again goes back to how you scaled your scene. If it's set up correctly, it should, in theory, look pretty decent right now. We're at a 2.8 f-stop. Basically, all you need to know is the lower that number is, the more out of focus stuff is going to be compared to that focus point. And so I'm really looking right here to try to match that focus as much as possible. We'll go back to 2.8. So 2.8, I'll kind of zoom in here. I think that's pretty decent. I might go down a little bit more. We'll try like a 2. Just trying to match some of this kind of bokeh to our actual table right there. And then also we need to zoom in the background, and yeah, this stuff is looking like it's falling off correctly. I'm kind of just eyeballing it. If I actually shot this footage myself, I would make sure I would take measurements of the camera data and all that stuff on the day. But since I didn't do that, we're just having to do some guesswork here. But to my eye, that looks pretty good, and it's going to give us a pretty accurate result. You can even see some of the wine bottles over here. Looks like they are blurred as much as the table. And so that is how you kind of know that we did it somewhat correctly. Okay, so the final thing that we need to do is go ahead and break this up into different passes so that we can composite everything else together realistically inside of Nuke. And so let's go ahead and set that up. I'm going to make a new view layer up here. Let's just name this objects. And then let's go ahead and create a new view layer. We'll just copy the settings real quick and name this shadow. And so if you watch any of my other Blender tutorials, it's going to be very similar to what I've done in those. But all we need to do is just go ahead and make the shadow layer, separate from the actual beauty layer. And so you'll see what I mean in a little bit. But let's go ahead and shadow. We'll go ahead and turn on some of these toggles. So I want the indirect only toggle. I want that to be on for the objects so that all of the shadows are basically shown onto our scene right there. And then for the object view layer, we need the opposite. We need the shadow to be as indirect only. And so that is our tables right there. And so, so now we have everything's pretty much set up correctly. We are ready to go ahead and break this down. We'll go into the compositing tab and hit use nodes. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this render layers node and set this to shadow. These are our two view layers up here. And then in order to render this out, I'm going to be rendering this out as a EXR multi-layer file. And so if I come over to the node properties, we'll go ahead and switch the file format. We're going to do EXR multi-layer. We'll do float, so half of our float, and then DWAA for our compression. Let's add another input. I'm going to do objects, and then also the shadow. So basically, we would just want to plug both of those into its correct socket right there. And of course, make a new folder path for this to render out into. Okay, so once we have that, we can hit accept inside of there. And now it should render out one file and have multiple layers within that file. So we can go ahead and double check that. I do want to go ahead and set up some render settings now. Now, one thing about heavy bokeh inside of Blender is that it needs a ton of information for it to not look like it's ghosting or anything like that inside of Blender. I think I ended up landing on a 1024 sample count, so that's going to give us a lot of samples to actually deal with. I do believe I went ahead and decreased this, divided this by 2, so a 0.005, and so that noise threshold again just basically allows it to have more samples per the scene. And then finally, I do think I went ahead and just rendered this in 4K, and so that's 200% right there. And then once we get inside of compositing, we'll actually reformat that down to 1080p. But again, this is just the kind of drawback that we have to do if we are doing a heavy bokeh or heavy depth of field. And so these things will look very, very crisp and everything once we get it inside of Nuke. And so anyway, let's make sure we have everything set up correctly. I'm going to go ahead and render a still image, and I highly recommend you guys do the same. I always like to do some test renders before I set this up to render overnight, just so I can make sure I get all of my human error out of the way in case I do, have to re-render this. I don't want to have to re-render this and waste another 10 hours or however long this is going to render. And so let's just do some tests for now and make sure everything is set up correctly. Okay, so once that has finished rendering, we can X out of here. Let's go into Blender again and check compositing, and I'll hold Shift Control and click to add a viewer node, and we'll just view both of these layers. And so everything is looking good up here. We can see that we have all of our kind of objects separated from their shadow. And they're both going into that file. You can set this up to render overnight. And once you're happy with everything, you can just render the animation and let it render out. Okay, we're finally in the home stretch. Now I am going to be compositing using Nuke today. It is a industry standard program. They do have a non-commercial version if you do want to follow along for free, but you can still apply all of this stuff to your own compositing programs such as After Effects or Fusion. You'll just have to translate some of the nodes and everything to those specific programs. Now let's go ahead and hop inside of Nuke. First of all, what I want to do is I want to read in some of this stuff. So I'll go ahead and read in our EXR footage. Now, caveat, I did have to re-render this out on my own end when I was doing some of these tests. So I actually have two separate files instead of the multi-layer kind of file that I had set up. But I'll show you how to use that if you did do it as a multi-layer. This is just how I had to do it since I had to render out another pass after the fact. But anyway, we can go ahead and read those both in, and we also need our footage in. And so I'll go ahead and grab that as well. It's just this MOV file right there. Let's go ahead and set up some settings inside Nuke. So I'm going to hit S to go over here. Now the FPS is 30, so we'll go ahead and set that up. And then the frame size is 1080p, and so we have that set up now as well. So yeah. Now that we have all of those properties, let's go ahead and set up the color management quickly. I just want to point out, if you view your actual EXR, first of all, if you're not seeing anything, what you actually have to do is we're going to add a shuffle node over here, and then you just want to click that layer and then click, I believe we named that view layer objects. And so you'll have an objects thing right here. You just want to click that in to read as sRGB. That's kind of the workaround of how to use multi-layer files. Again, I don't have that there because I rendered them out as separate passes, but that's just how you kind of see them out like that. But anyways, if you view here, you can see everything is blown out, and you might be wondering, why is this happening? I remember when I was first doing Blender, I actually purely stuck to PNG sequences for this exact reason of why I wasn't seeing it exactly how it was out inside of Blender. And so what we actually need to do, kind of the workaround that I found to work for me inside of Nuke, I'm again still developing my own process. And so if you have a better way, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. But this is the way that I kind of like doing it inside of Nuke. We'll hit S again, go to the color properties, and then what I want to do is I want to be using ACES, and so we'll go to OCIO, and then instead of the OCIO config being the Nuke one, I'll hit ACES 1.2. And so now you can see as soon as we did that, all of these colors are reading much more accurately and much better to what it was like inside of Blender. And so as you can see, we're getting that. Now it is way too saturated, so we're going to have to go ahead and do some desaturation and all that stuff to get it more to what it was looking like inside of Blender. But this is a good kind of starting off point. Anyways, we'll come back down here. Now our main footage is reading an error. We'll double click inside of that. And that's just because sRGB is not defined as sRGB in the input transform. What we have to do is just set it to output as sRGB. So the color picking preset. That's just kind of some of the preset names. And so that's why it was giving us an error. But now you can see it looks the exact same here. So yeah, so that is the kind of color process. Again, probably most likely not the correct way. I'm not a guru of the color settings inside of Nuke from Blender, but that is what I found to work the best for me. Anyways, let's go ahead and do some compositing now. So I'm going to add M to add a merge node. We're going to merge that with our original footage. So like that. Let's go ahead and bring that down here just so we can make stuff organized. But yeah, as you can see, we did render this as a 4K file. So if I double click inside here and view that, you can see it's 4K. So what I want to go and do is I want to reformat that down. So I'm just going to hit tab and add a reformat node right there. And it should automatically reformat that down to 1080p. And now everything is lined up. So yeah, so now we are ready to go ahead and start kind of, doing some color correction. So first of all, like I said before, everything is way too saturated. So I'm going to add C to add a color correct node, and we'll just boost down that saturation. Now, real quickly, I do want to talk about a little unique thing about the Nuke kind of color process. Whenever we do color correction or anything like that, we want to be working with the unpremultiplied footage. And the reason we want to do that is because there'll actually be a buffer layer, and so it'll actually go ahead and affect everything. Whereas if we just had it like this, there are some times where it actually flicker and stuff on the outside as some of the color correction was incorrectly kind of put on there. I don't know the technical explanation, but that's kind of the explanation I like to provide. So we'll add a unpremult node here. All you can see it does is it adds that border in. Again, this is what Blender is kind of automatically doing. This is before the alpha is applied. And so now we have that. And then after we do all of our color correction, we'll go ahead and pre-multiply it again. So in theory, if we kind of select both of these and on and off it, literally nothing changes. And that is ideal. Again, this is just kind of the correct way to work. You'll maybe never run into an issue where it's really needed. But again, this is the industry standard way. And so I'm trying to teach you guys some of the industry standard practices that you can apply to your own work. So yeah, there we go. We have that pre-multiply. Now let's go ahead and do some color correction. So I want to go ahead and match these as accurately as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and hit G, add a gray node, and I want to go ahead and correct the black and white points. So if I'm going to hit D over here to disable this gray node, we'll come here, and this kind of black point right here is the black point of our actual CG. And so that is the thing that we want to actually color correct. So I'll just select, there seems to be some good black points over here. Black point is basically just the darkest part of the image, by the way. And so we can just select that. And then vice versa, we also want the white point. And so the white point is going to be kind of the whitest part of the image. And we have some nice white highlights over here. So I'm going to select those. And then we need to do the opposite, the lift and the gain. The lift, of course, is going to be the blackest of the thing that we're trying to grade to. And so that's going to be this footage over here. So I'll just kind of select that. By the way, how I'm selecting that, I totally forgot to mention, is just holding Control, Shift, and then clicking is just to select that area. So that's how I'm selecting those, pick selecting those, if you will. Next, we'll do the white point. And so what is a good area to do white? Seems like we have some good white values down here, so I'll select this whole area, and there we go. Now we have everything kind of defined, and in theory, if we kind of view this and re-enable our node, you can see everything is a little bit more color matched. Now that is way too much, and so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go down to this mix and just make that a lot less. And so you can see it's giving us a little bit more matching to the color of our scene, and just matches it in a little bit better. Okay, so that is looking good. Let's go ahead and do the shadows in our scene. Now, again, if you are doing the multi-layer method, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to make a shuffle node, and then you're going to plug that shuffle node into your main kind of CG layer over here. And then you're going to come up here to the shuffle node, and you're going to find that shadow pass that you have. And so once you have that shadow pass, you click into that, it'll go ahead and link over to the RGB stuff. And so that is what you have to do if you're doing the multi-layer pass. Since I'm doing it as their own individual passes, I just have this shadow file over here. And so I actually think I need to add a shuffle node. We'll come over here, RGBA, and here we go. Here's my shadow pass. I'll link that over here, and now we have a good shadow alpha over here. So that's kind of what I had to do to get a accurate result. Anyway, we'll come over here. I do want to grade the footage, and we'll add that shuffle over there into that. And then let's go ahead and try to nail in the same kind of color scheme of this shadow right here. So first of all, we'll decrease the gamma. Also, everything is reading a little bit too saturated, so I'm going to go ahead and add a color correct down here, and we're going to decrease the saturation as well as the contrast just a little, so we can start to match it a little bit better down there. So we'll go ahead and decrease that. We'll decrease the multiply as well. And already you can see that we're getting much more accurate shadows to the actual thing down here. Now I do believe the actual, the shadow here is giving off a little bit of like a green / blue hue. And so what I can do is I'll just kind of mess around with the hue down here. And so as you can see, I, pretty much just bumped it to green right there. And, in my eyes, that matches pretty perfectly already. So you can see that is basically the result that we're getting. It's much better than what we could have gotten outside of Blender. And so hopefully that alone just shows you the value of kind of compositing. Now, I will say some of these shadows back here are reading a little too dark in my opinion. So what I might do is I'll bring this over here. This is kind of just me, testing around with some things. I'll add a gray node and set that to alpha. And then if I add a roto node, so that's just O on my keyboard, I'll place that over here. And then we'll just kind of highlight some of these areas in the back. It seems like it's just those kind of two plates back there. And then with those selected, I'll add a blur node as well. So add B to add a blur, and we'll just do it to like 35 or something. And then let's just decrease. Let's see. I think I need to decrease the gain. There we go. So just bringing down those back. All that's doing, by the way, is we'll go into the alpha channel. So we're basically just grading the alpha channel. And so you can see it's this very bright white color back here. I'm basically just grading that down to be a lighter gray. And so that basically that's just affects our alpha channel. And so it's less intense back there. If you're used to Nuke, this is kind of a no-brainer process. But if you come from like After Effects or anything like that, it's a very kind of unique workaround inside of Nuke that makes Nuke one of the greatest programs ever. But anyway, let's go ahead and animate our mask. I'm pretty sure it should be fine for the most part. But I just want to make sure we're not running into like any harsh lines or anything like that. Yeah, so that looks pretty good. So that is our kind of shadow pass done. And let's do some final kind of final touches to get this thing looking as accurate as possible. First of all, I do think everything is looking a little bit too sharp. I know we try to match the defocus inside of Blender as much as possible, but it's still reading a little bit too sharp for me, especially some of this stuff back here. And so in testing, I played around with a lot of stuff. I played around with the defocus node, all that stuff. What I actually find to work for me was adding a soften node and just softening everything, ever so slightly. So if you come back here, you know, that's way too much. So we'll actually decrease the amount. We'll do like a 0.23, something like that. But yeah, as you can see, it just softens everything very slightly. Like literally you couldn't even be able to tell in full screen. That's what I find a lot of times works the best, is little minor adjustments that you can't even tell on a grand scale. Always make that thing much more realistic. You know, I don't know how to explain it, but that's the basic explanation. Anyways, so that is that. Let's also go ahead and add some light wrap. Now, light wrap and bloom are two things, in my opinion, that a lot of beginner compositors overdo. And so our mission is to do it barely so that we see it a little bit, but don't notice it a lot, because it can be way overdone. And in my opinion, doesn't look too good if it's way overdone. So we'll increase the intensity. So something like that. You can see basically back here, what it's doing is it's adding some light wrapping around the to the CGI and blending some of that stuff in. Now, again, this is where we can go way too much. And so what I actually like to do is I like to add a grade node here. And so basically our B input is what it's going to be reading from. And I'm going to go ahead and turn my gain down. And so if I turn just the gain down, remember the gain is all of the highlight values, it's just going to affect those areas, but still leave some of the gamma areas. So like these areas I'm actually liking pretty much, but these areas before were way too much. And so it's just gaining down some of those. And so even that might be a little bit too much. So we'll go into the intensity. I think let's do like a 10 maybe. Might be too much. Yeah, so as you can see, it's just blending everything in together a little bit more. I'm not noticing it too much in the background, but that is okay. And then everything is looking good. Now you do want to make sure in your super highlight areas, like back here, like this stuff can be way overdone. So I might increase that a little bit. And then just for this stuff back here, since that stuff is really, really bright, I'll add another grade node. So we'll do another, it's going to be very ugly over here. But hopefully we'll be able to figure all this stuff out. So this grade 5 node, I'm going to link up to this roto node up here. And with this roto node, I just want it to affect this area up here. And so I'll just kind of select all of that area up here. I do need to add a blur. We'll add that to like 60 or something like that to just blur that out. And then for this one is where I just want to affect the super highlight areas. And so let's do the gain and set it down to something like that. And that is much better. So yeah, so literally just affecting this area with that roto node, right? And then it's just affecting the gain of this area. And so it's kind of almost a mask on a mask, if you will. But yeah, all that kind of adds up to make the shot look a lot more realistic, in my opinion. We can on and off that. So as you can see, it's adding a little bit, and that still might be too much. So I'm just going to play it by ear, and let's divide this by 2. And so I'm only doing 5.2. So if I turn this on and off, yeah, literally you can see barely anything changes, but I just think it's a kind of nice addition to the overall piece. So yeah, so that is all looking good. Let's go ahead and set this up to render. Let's add a right node. So I'm going to hit W, and then let's set this up here and save it in a new location. Okay, so once you have saved that, I went ahead and saved it as a MOV. Now we are getting this kind of error right here. And again, that's just because of the naming convention of ACES is a little bit different than what Nuke is automatically set up for. So I'm going to save it as Apple ProRes. We'll do 4444. Then a color space down here, instead of gamma 2.2, we're just going to do sRGB. Now, one quick thing I do want to quickly point out is we're not doing anything with the grain of our actual piece. And that's because, in my opinion, the footage that this was shot on had like 0 grain at all. And I'm actually exporting this for, phone use. So basically Instagram and all that stuff. But if you are interested in the grain workflow that I use, I will have a video coming out soon of how I might match video grain for CGI and stuff like that. So stay tuned for that. That'll be coming out soon, and it'll be a super quick process of how I match the grain perfectly, the industry standard way inside of Nuke. Anyways, with all of that set up now, all we have to do is double click inside of here. We'll come down to render, and we have 1 to 230, which is good, and we'll hit OK and let that render out. Okay, so here is the final video that we got from this tutorial. As you can see, we have some pretty cool results and everything. Of course, this is everything from camera tracking to CGI to compositing, a somewhat industry standard kind of workflow for you guys to use for your own footage. Anyways, I hope you guys learned a thing or two from this video or got a cool result along the process. But anyways, again, I will have a Patreon link down in the description below if you want to check that out. But thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.